Welcome to Link Internationally, a multilingual podcast where we are learning internationally and networking the kingdom. There were more than 6.9 million international students in 2022, and that figure is constantly growing. I'm Anza, your host. I invite you to join me as I discover the inspiring physical and spiritual journeys of international students as they share their personal, life-changing experiences with us. These stories enable us to enlarge our vision of what God has been doing in and through international student migration around the world in order to make His name known among the nations. Today, I have the pleasure to interview Sue, who is from Malaysia and who studied in India and also the UK. Hello, Sue. It's great to have you. Thanks so much for accepting my invitation. You were born and raised in Malaysia. In what part of the country was that, and what was your childhood and teenage years like?
Hello, thank you so much for having me, and it's my pleasure to be here today. So yes, I'm born and raised in Malaysia, in a small island called Penang Island, but this island is small but yet very populated. Penang attracts both local and international people for work and leisure because one side of the island we have industries and factories, but on the other side of the island we have many beautiful beaches, so that attracts tourists too. So a little bit a background of Malaysia. We consist of three major racial groups, which are the Malays, Chinese, and the Indians. And Malaysia is an Islamic country. But very, very thankfully for non-Malays, we still have the freedom to choose our own faith and religion. And we are famous for our very delicious food because we are a melting pot of many different cultures. So naturally, we have many kinds of food from different places. And we celebrate each other's festivals among different racial groups. A little bit of my background. I very thankfully grew up in a Christian family, but my parents are first generation Christians. So that means that my parents, they are the only Christians among their family. They came to know Christ in their teenage years. And I always remember my father told me this story that when he came to know Christ in high school years through a friend, his grandmother would say to him, "You can go to church. Of course, you can go because they teach you good things, but you cannot be baptized." Because back then, even non-educated older generation people will know that when someone gets baptized in church, they are being serious with their faith and that they are proclaiming their faith to the world. So, as I said, both my parents are the only Christians amongst their family and siblings. Family occasions are quite difficult to navigate, but very thankfully, my father has taught us how to how to go to family occasions and to be respectful, but not to join into any pagan worshipping. Since young, we were taught how to not to join into any Taoism or Buddhism rituals. However, in most Chinese funerals, people will bow down to the dead, mostly to show respect. But being a Christian family, we were taught how to respect these occasions, but not to join in. Okay, not to worship any other being other than God. It's not always easy, but my parents, especially my father, has always stood firm in his faith, and this faith has shown and is passed down to his children. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sue. So you chose to study dentistry, and you told me that in Malaysia, it is not uncommon to have a dental degree that will offer you to do 2 years in India and 3 years in Malaysia. So why is that?
Yes, so I did my dental degree, as we call it, a twinning program. So I did the first 2 years in India and the three remaining years in Malaysia, back where I was born and raised. And this has a very, very peculiar reason, which not many people understand. It's like, why would you want to go to India to study? So in medicine and dentistry, we have to learn anatomy, which is the structure of a human body. And the best way to learn anatomy is to learn it from a real body, dead or alive. So in India, cadavers are very widely available in teaching hospitals. because economy is not so great and there are many poor families, the family of the deceased will sell the dead body to the hospital for teaching purposes, just to get some money to sustain their living. So when I went to India, I went to a very small town in Tamil Nadu called Salem to do my studies. And I was there for 2 years. Here I experienced a very different life back from where I was from in Malaysia. I experienced poverty where even electricity and clean water was scarce. So I remembered very clearly that the electricity and the light went off for 8 times the first day I reached in India. And there was no water system running into the hostel. So we rely on a water tank that comes every week, once a week, to supply water. So as I speak, definitely not the very glamorous studying abroad experience that someone would expect when I went to India.
Wow, that's quite something. So,
Yes, it
what,
is. Yeah.
yeah, what were the challenges that you faced as you got ready to embark? So, we're thinking of the start of your journey, on a journey to India and be there on your own. You were thinking, oh, what is it going to be like? How did the Lord use that experience to grow your knowledge of Jesus and your faith in Him through living in a context that was so different from yours?
Yeah, so when I was in India, there was only one local church available, and I didn't have transportation to get to the city. So very locally, if I would just take a small, we call it a tutut, like a small cab, because it's a little bit too far to walk. So we have only one local church available, which is only a small hut. So my Sunday worship changed drastically from a very comfortable church to a small house with no electricity. No electricity means no music, no bands, not fancy at all, no air condition. However, I dragged a few local Malaysian Christian friends and insisted that we go to church every Sunday. Here in India, in this environment, I truly experienced God in many different ways during my hardship. And when I look back, I'm very glad that God sent me to India. And it was a very humbling journey, I would say, because God taught me how to give thanks for every little thing that I have in my life. And honestly, I don't need much to be happy. I give thanks that when there was water coming out of the shower, literally, because there were so many years in India that I didn't have a shower over my head. So looking back, I realized that all I need is really to rely on Him and God will provide for all my needs.
Amen. Yeah, it's so true and wonderful, a wonderful reminder of God's provision and goodness. So a few years later, Sue, you pursued further studies in orthodontics in a very different country, in the UK. The
Yes.
experience was very different from your first time studying abroad, also because at that point you were married, and in the UK you did not encounter issues with water and electricity. There were more churches than in the town of Tamil Nadu where you were. However, what similarities did you see? Things that did not change? And how did the first day in India help you during your second period of studies in the UK?
Yes, so after a few years of working as a dentist, this time around, God brought me to further my studies. So God brought me and my husband to a very different country to study. This time I went to Cardiff in UK and I specialize in orthodontics. So in the UK, there were many different churches available. Finding a church to settle in is not easy. We spent a few weeks going to different churches, but we realized that we couldn't quite settle. So me and my husband, we prayed for God to give us a very clear sign. And so we said to God that, God, if this is the church that you want us to stay for the next 3 years, please send someone to speak to us, because there were weeks that we were going to church and we felt out of place because of cultural backgrounds and type of worship, and we felt like we didn't belong. And we didn't want that to be the church that we want to be in for the next 3 years. So after we made that prayer, on that very Sunday where we attended this particular church, the pastor of the church came to approach us. And then the rest is history. So me and my husband stayed and served in that church faithfully for the next 3 years. my husband and I was very involved in international student ministry, and I realized that I could minister to many international students, especially those that come from Asia, where I'm from, and especially those who come from India, because I had the experience. God sent me to India to live in India, so I could understand international students that were from India. So that point of time, I felt that I was so privileged that God has used me many, many years ago to mold me in this foreign land in India, that I could use my experience and to serve God in this way. So what a privilege to live the years, especially to see God revealing his purpose just 10 years down the line.
Yeah, it is wonderful. Thank you. Let's talk
Okay.
about how the Lord helped you grow in understanding, in your understanding of the Church of Christ and God's plan for His church as you lived in different countries and then got involved in different churches. What pieces of advice would you give to someone studying in a place where there is hardly any church, and to someone else in another place where there is so much choice of local churches to choose from?
Yeah, so when I first moved church, so I've been to many churches for different purposes, mainly when I relocate. So before going to India, I've relocated locally in Malaysia before, and that's when a Christian relocates, you have to find another church, right? And naturally, we would want to find a church which suits us, that the style of worship, the kind of teaching, and you want to be comfortable in that place. But when I first went to India, there was no choice at all. There was only one church. So I have a simple advice. So if there's only one church, choose to go. Okay, no matter how different or how same, or yeah, because it's a choice. You choose to go every Sunday. You choose to go. If there are more choices, you still choose to go. Okay, no matter the season, no matter the background, no matter how different or how similar it is to your home church. And we choose to go, and we choose to turn up, because God is the same God in your home country and it's the same God in a foreign land. So I have learned that as long as we stay faithful to following Christ in every seasons in our life, no matter where we are, no matter where God sends us, God will guide and lead us to green pastures.
Indeed. So we have such a faithful God who goes before us wherever we go. And it's a joy to belong to Him and also to share His good news to so that others may know Him. Now, I'm thinking of how sharing the good news in different contexts look like. I recall a story told by a Christian friend who visited your beautiful country. And there he met a lady distributing tracts at the door of a church. And it was written, "For non-Muslims only." And in your context, it is forbidden by law to evangelize Muslims. When you went to India, it was a different story. You are in a Hindu majority context, and then you moved to the UK, and again, it was different. There, you met people from both Hindu and Muslim background, I would imagine. How has the Lord helped you through these moves understand His heart for the world, for people of all nations, cultural and religious backgrounds?
Yes, so you're absolutely right. So in Malaysia, the law says that we can only share the gospels to non-Muslims only. So any invitation that we share out, any digital or physical flyers that we send out has to have a very fine print to say that it is for non-Muslims only. And if we don't obey this law, many churches get closed down because of this. So in some ways we are liberal, but in some ways we are not very liberal. Yeah, so as growing up as Christians in Malaysia, we have to be very careful when we invite our friends to come to church or even to special events like Christmas celebrations. I was brought up in this context, but when I moved to the UK, I remember there was one occasion because, as I mentioned, I was serving in an international student lunch. So there was this event where we set up a poll for people to sign up for those who wants to come for lunch so that we could prepare enough food for lunch. And I remembered seeing a name called Mohammed who signed up. And in my mind, I had this red flag in me that can this be it? Like, will we get into trouble? Will I get into trouble? Will the church get into trouble? Will the authorities come over us by inviting a Muslim to church? And then that's when I yeah, immediately I felt like God was speaking to me. And then I realized that the gospel is for everyone. It is for every tongue, every nation, every tribe. Just because I grew up in a background that was very strictly prohibiting the gospel being spoken to Muslims, it doesn't mean that this is God's will. God's will and God's heart is for everyone to know Him. Yeah.
Amen. Yeah, absolutely. Now you have been back to Malaysia. Could you tell us whether you experienced a reverse culture shock and what it was like? Some of our listeners may be students who are getting ready to go back to their country of origin after their studies. How do you think one of the best way to prepare for reverse culture shock is?
Yes, so I've recently been back to Malaysia for around 3 months, and I felt like the first few weeks was the most difficult. And I could say that the reverse cultural shock is even stronger than the cultural shock that I experienced when I first left Malaysia. So, for those who are going through this, I would suggest that just give yourself time and to take it easy, and so that you could slowly find your feet again back home and also in your home church. Again, choose to show up. When you go back to your home church, you might find that, wow, I've been away for a few years now. I probably don't know half of the people in my home church. I don't feel home at home anymore. So some people might feel that, but choose to show up, choose to get to know your local church people again. Choose to turn up, choose to join into activities, yeah, and choose to join a local cell group, and I promise you that things will get easier.
Thank you for the advice. So, in what way the valuable lessons the Lord taught you during your stays outside your country nurture your thinking and your Christian daily living at home, at church, and at work now that you're back to your country?
Yeah, so having been living in different countries during different phases of life, God has taught me that my circumstances and my surroundings are not permanent. And the only constant and permanent thing that I have in life is God and my faith in Him. So therefore, Christ is where I should put my hope on, and I think everyone should put their hope in Christ also, because He is the one true God that will never change.
Yeah, we have an unchanging God who remains the same yesterday, today, and forever. Thank you so much for that beautiful reminder, Sue, and thank you for accepting my invitation again. It was wonderful to hear about Malaysia and India and the UK. And God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in and spending this time with us. Before we go, I want to give a quick shout out to Scott, who handles all the technical side of the podcast and keeps everything sounding great and running smoothly each episode. And to all our listeners, thanks again for your support. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe and share the podcast, and we'll see you next time for another great conversation. Remember, there is an episode that is published every Monday. We'll hear from David from France next week and Sergio from Colombia the following week. Until next time, take care and remember, God is at work across borders.